You hear me?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Speed Up Your Quality Process, brought to you by HiQA. I'm Lisa Sterling, your host and moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I would like to mention just a couple of housekeeping items. We invite you to ask questions throughout the presentation, as your phone is muted during the session. You can submit your questions by typing in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will address the questions received at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for playback in a few days. I would now like to introduce you to our presenters for today. Ryan Ganser, Regional Sales Director for HiQA, and Chad Helland, VP of Strategic Accounts for HiQA. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Ryan to get started.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Lisa. Hello, everybody. Appreciate you attending today's webinar. Before we jump into the actual platform, we are going to spend just a couple of minutes going over a couple of slides to really give everybody here an idea of who HiQA is and what we're all about. But like I mentioned, we will spend most of today's session inside the platform, in which we're going to show you how you can plan a job faster, 5 times faster, specifically as it relates to auto bluing. Then we'll also show how we can automate the manufacturing data collection process and speed up your analysis by 75% or more. And lastly, we'll show how we can create reports such as the FAI and PPAP in just a matter of a couple clicks. So about HiQA, we do have over 1,300 customers consisting of 5 different continents. We're a global company, but headquartered here in New Jersey. So we do have over 20,000 users worldwide, primarily in the aerospace, defense, medical, and seeing a little bit more automotive industries. Customer size ranges from large OEMs and tier ones all the way down to 2-person job shops. So being in the aerospace, defense, and medical industries, obviously data security is of a huge concern. We'll get into that a little bit more towards the end of the call, but just know there's no issues there. And we have been in business for upwards of 10 years, and we've evolved into much more than just the auto ballooning software that we were founded on. So we really do have a customer-driven culture as far as adapting to our customers' needs and wants. So HiQA is an all-in-one manufacturing quality suite. To emphasize a couple of things there: manufacturing, quality, and all-in-one. So we're bringing in the part and job planning, the production and data collection, and reporting and submissions all into one platform. The way we're able to do so is because we are a database-driven solution. So those areas I mentioned, job planning, production data and analysis, reporting and submission, and even supplier collaboration, that's all able to be done inside one system, the HiQA database. So oftentimes people prior to HiQA, maybe they have the quality department doing things one way, manufacturing and operations doing another way, really working in siloed areas where a lot of interpretation can be done incorrectly in those different areas. So we're eliminating those siloed areas of information because you're doing everything in one spot from a quality manufacturing perspective. So now I am going to turn it over to Chad, our VP of Strategic Accounts. He's going to dive deep into the software, show some common use cases, and then I'll wrap things up with some additional slides, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A. Chad, all you.
All right, thanks, Ryan. All right. Should be able to see my screen now. So,
yes, we can.
I'm going to start out with a couple different steps in this, and I want to talk about why we're doing this and what we're accomplishing here. So, whether you're doing your ballooning process on paper or using something like Excel, some kind of combination like that, Sorry about that. Can everybody hear me again?
We can hear you now. Yes, you did cut
All
out
right.
for just a second.
Let's hopefully this stays on this time. All right. Still good?
Still good. Let me see
Perfect.
HiQA.
All right. You can see my screen. So to get back to where I was talking about before, um, essentially, whether you're doing this manually on paper or you're doing it digitally with with Excel or some other method, the big problem that you run into is it's not really centralized. So you still have multiple points where this data is being retained at. We solve that with our solution. So everything starts with a balloon drawing. So I'm going to select new from drawing here. I'm going to bring in a part that I'm going to add the ballooning to, select my file. That brings it in. We're creating a part record at this point. So you can see my drawing here on the screen. We have some information that was brought in from the drawing. I have some setup defaults in the software that kind of allow me to take some shortcuts. So I don't have to select these things each time, things like tolerance tables, what my unit sets are, that kind of stuff. Ultimately, once we have those things all set though, this process is pretty quick. I bring in my drawing like I did just now. I'm gonna click on an auto balloon button up here. I'm gonna have some preset stuff in here. I can also change these at this time if I want to. I'm gonna click OK, and that begins the OCR process on this. First thing it identifies is the border of the drawing, and then it's going left to right, top to bottom, and just identifying all those characteristics. So you can see here in 12 seconds, I've identified 34 characteristics on this drawing. Now, it's not just doing that. So it's obviously putting all that information on here. I've got balloons and I've got shapes surrounding that, but it's also identifying what type of a dimension it is. It's putting that requirement in my bill of characteristics down here. If there's actually tolerance called out on there, something like this +2, +1, it's actually identifying that tolerance in that at the same time as well. Otherwise, it knows to look to my tolerance table to apply that based on the precision. All of those things happened in that 11 seconds. I've also got my sampling rules set up in this, and those can be different based on different customers, based on product families, whatever different logic you want for that. But ultimately, this is kind of that big first difference between doing this on paper or doing this, in Excel or some other, myriad of combinations. This is now in the database. Anytime that I want to make a job for this part, this record exists to do that against. I don't have to copy anything. I don't have to worry about stuff being incorrectly populated anywhere. This is in here. We have the ability to do other stuff in here as well. So if we have criticalities that we want to utilize, we can drive different symbols on the drawing. We can also have that drive different sampling rules. All of this happens within the same area on here. There are some tools also. So if I want to measure my trace, or I want to keep traceability, for example, on my material, I can select this balloon material button, select this. That becomes a material record that I can associate certifications to. And that leads into some of the stuff we're going to talk to in a little bit about PQP, document management, from a job perspective to retain a package, generating PPAPs, FAIs, gauge R&R, that kind of stuff. All of this kind of pulls together in the same process here. Once we have a fully ballooned drawing like this, all the information down here in a bill of characteristics, typical process we're going to go through is just verify everything looks good, review it. We have some pretty slick tools in here like whiteout balloons, so I can quickly identify if anything got missed. Additionally, if I need to do revisions on this, it's a pretty slick process as well. I can literally bring a new drawing over top of this, overlay it. Looks kind of like 3D goggles with the blue and the red. I can see things that align perfectly. Those show up in black. Anything that is on my old drawing but isn't on my new one is going to show up in red. Anything that's new that wasn't on my old one is going to show up in blue. And I don't have to re-balloon those things. The only thing I have to do anything with is items that change between those. And then as an additional benefit, if I'm ever curious what changed on an old rev, I can always actually flip between those on my current one to look at them. When it starts to get us into the process of looking at doing some of our PQP planning and such. Basically, it starts off the same way that we've gotten to here, but now we're going to start introducing the concept of manufacturing operations. Okay. When I first balloon a drawing, everything is going into what we call this finish stop. Now, if we weren't concerned about having process flows or control plans or FMEAs, and we weren't doing in-process inspections, we're good here. We don't have to go any further. I can generate Excel plans to inspect against. I can inspect against our shop floor collection module. I can use that how I need to. But if we do want to start utilizing some of those things, that's where we start to generate the manufacturing ops for this stuff. So if I select a couple on here, and I'm just going to kind of grab a couple just to do the example, and then I click on this add operation, it's going to create a new logical operation in here with those dimensions associated to it. You can kind of see the different colored stripes, how they show up in there. Additionally, I can rename this. There's some defaults in how I want my names to be auto-generated, so you can change that if you need to. But I'm just going to make one in here called roughing. But I'm also going to tie a process to this, and I'll explain that in a moment so you can understand why I'm doing that. I'm going to grab a couple more. Now, it's important to note also, I can select these more than once. So you can see the first one I set up as a roughing operation. When I set that up, I can actually modify on that specific operation my nominals as well as my tolerances. So if I want to have those a little bit open for my first roughing pass on there and inspect those and check that for my internal in-process manufacturing ops, I can, but I can also check it later as a final inspection, and I can have that information flow into an FAI if I want to. So there's a lot of flexibility that goes with this. One other thing that does exist at this level also, I'm not going to show today just for the sake of time, but if you ever want to see it later, we can show you that as well, is we have the ability to associate manufacturing operation drawings. So if you have your own internal drawings that you've generated for these processes, we can have those associated in here. That can be the actual digital document that your operators will inspect against. But again, when they populate those results, they can populate back to your master drawing for your submission packets, that kind of stuff. So it creates kind of a seamless environment with the ultimate best case scenario, I guess I would say. Again, I'm just going to kind of give this one a name. We'll call this one drilling. And I'll tie it to the process. And then I'm going to make one more. Just going to grab a couple more, add an operation. And this one we're going to call our milling. So at the core level, what this has done for us now, this allows us a method to break these into groups for our operators to inspect against. So right now, if I change this dropdown from a finished part to roughing, I'm going to see the drawing as the roughing operator would see it. These are the inspections they're going to see. These are the things that they need to collect against. So they don't have this crazy drawing with all these things that they have to worry about. They just have the things that they need to focus on. That's the core level of it. The next level is, because we're setting this up like this and because we've associated processes to this, we're also dynamically creating our process flow, our control plan, and our FMEA at the same time. So now I'm going to jump over to the processes to show you how that's getting populated. If I go under manufacturing here to the process library, this is the list of my processes. So this would be unique to you. Inside any one of these, I'm going to grab my milling, for example. I've got my process type symbol. So this is where we're dynamically generating that process flow out. I can generate template flows on here as well that can populate into our downstream documentation, but I also have my FMEA failure modes, their weights, that kind of stuff. So obviously doing it this way, we have some more upfront setup, but this is a one-time setup, much like our part is. Once this is in the database, this is there. So when we're making documentation from this, we don't have to do this each time. We don't have to copy and paste. We don't have to do any of that. this is getting the data in there. It's bringing it in correct. I don't have to worry about typos. I don't have to forget about forgetting something. As long as I have my operations in there, we're good. Okay. I am going to flip over to show you what the shop floor collection aspect of this looks like from that. So with this is our shop floor collection. This is IM Explorer. Inside this, I can see my part. I have this opened up to the roughing operation. I can also select my different operations. But if I'm on my op here, I've got my first inspection dimension. It's 0.5 plus or minus 20. I have a caliper. So in here, I'm going to select my actual caliper I'm checking this with, and you can enforce this and require it, or you can leave it open. It's up to you. If I populate my result accurately or correctly, that's going to turn green and take me to the next characteristic. This one is going to be wide open at 99, so it's going to be hard to fail that. So I'm just going to pass this one. I want to show you a failed instance as well. I now have this 4-inch dimension plus or minus 20. So I'm going to put in a 403, click accept. Now I'm going to get a notification saying that this is out of tolerance. Do I want to measure it again because perhaps I entered data in incorrectly? Do I want to adjust a value? Maybe I was measuring that off of square block and I need to take that tear off. Or is it actually incorrect and I need to keep that as a failed record? In this case, I'm going to select keep failed. Now it'll let me generate an NCR for this. If I had one already in here, I could associate it to that, which is why I get this screen. Instead, I'm going to click on add new. Not great at measuring. I can have some other associations that I can tie to that if I wish to. We also have some defect codes and shortcuts here for associating, so I don't have to type out the same stuff every time. Once I've done that, I now have a new NCR record for that. You can see it shows up in red. And then I would continue on, or perhaps based on your process, this becomes a stopping point we need to evaluate. But the other thing I want to point out is all of this information is happening in real time. So when I'm on that, I can see that inside the system right now. So I'm going to flip over to my inspection manager again. And I'm going to go to my roughing pass, select my sample. And here's the results. So you can see my first one I selected, I got it correctly. I've got the caliper I checked with that, or checked that with. But then I get to here with my failed one, and I can see my NCR information in right here, all that. I also, because I have it set up to send me notifications, I also got an email signifying that I had a failed result on there. So that's an option you can have turned on if you want, or alternatively, if you don't. Also, besides being able to populate this information in here manually, or digitally, it can be passed from a digital device. Actually, I can show you real quick. Here's my failed email that I got. But we also can bring in data from CMMs, VMMs, whatever you have, output type devices that are doing your inspections. So those can be done a couple different ways. I can either bring in my inspection results by selecting those, bringing in the file and then tying it in manually. Or we also do have what we call machine or automatic machine data import. From here, essentially, we've set up what we call presets. It's a folder where it's just monitoring for that data to come into. We work with you to make sure that the data is coming in the way we need to. When we're doing it automatically like this, there's some additional data that may not already be in there, such as job numbers, samples, that kind of stuff. So we make sure that's all set up correctly, working correctly. And then it just runs in the background. When they inspect information that comes in, it syncs in, and then ultimately inside the actual results, we'll see those results populated against this. The system won't matter, it doesn't matter to the system where that data came from. It just all syncs up together. I can see what it was checked against by looking at the results and what tool did that inspection. But ultimately, it all combines into one collected job. And from there, now we can generate our data as we need to, our submission package stuff. Okay. At this point, I'm going to flip over to a job that I've already populated some results against so that I can show the PQP documentation, what that information kind of looks like, and without having to spend a lot of time in here populating some fake data. So again, we have the same part here. I have my manufacturing operations built into here, kind of the same way. I've got some sampling rules. With that, I generated some jobs, but now I'm going to go to the PQP tab. So inside PQP, there's kind of three main terms that we utilize. The first one that I'm going to discuss is what we're looking at right here. This is what we call our indexes. For our terminology, an index is an assembly or a collection of different documents that I wish to submit as a package. Now you can have a multitude of these and they may vary across different industries, across different customers, but ultimately it's a shortcut method to be able to pull multiple documents together that I need for this scenario, for this customer in this case. If it's aerospace, it might be, an AS9102, like I have in here with a Rev C. Maybe I've got a submission warrant tied into that. I might need the process flow, control plan, FMEA, but that index is intended to have the things that you need for that package, okay? The other two terms that are really key in this are workflow, which is step-by-step instructions I'll show in a moment on the processes that I need to go through and the people that are responsible for those processes. So this is a legitimate stop, check, assign who has the rights to do this, tied in with either I am passing this on from my station, or I am doing a digital signature, whatever that looks like, or maybe I'm failing it and kicking it back so it can be recycled. All of those are part of the workflow system. The last one is really the actual documents. So we have kind of two that go into that. One is the static ones, which you don't have interaction with. So it might be an associated document like the balloon drawings. It might be something that's getting all data from the database, like maybe a PPAP might have a cover page or a couple pages in there that are just getting data from there, but you're not actually entering data on the screen. But then we also have dynamic reports, which you can interact with, okay? So first things first, I'm gonna open up our part submission warrant. This one is one of those dynamic forms I mentioned. The way I can tell is there are some, kind of a yellow, that old folder manila color box on there. Those boxes are things that I can interact with. Even though this looks like a printed report, it's actually one of our dynamic forms where I can type information on here if I need to. Now, these can be customized for you. We do have stock versions of all of these, or standard documents as we refer to them. Typically, those are geared towards meeting industry standards, but we all know OEMs kind of tend to skew some of these sometimes and modify them. So we can modify these to suit your needs if we need to as well. But these interactive areas, I can type in what I need. I can populate checkboxes. Additionally, if there's areas that you need to have logic around them, let's say I have to have a field that I can populate, but I don't want to populate all the time. And if it's not populated, I want it to automatically put in their NA, something like that. So those are all things we can do. The rest of these information areas that are not yellow are pulling in data automatically from the database, okay? And then you can see over here, I've got a digital signature area. So all of that is part of the dynamic form. I'm now going to flip over to the workflow tab here, kind of show you what this looks like. Now, this is this is our most basic workflow. So this one essentially consists of generating the document, approving it, and now we can send it on complete. I've only got one level here that I can do associate responsibility for. I can have multiple people, so if somebody's not available to do it, they can get assigned that as well. Additionally, as new topics show up in here that somebody's responsible for, those are going to show up in our notifications here. So you can see I'm not terribly good at keeping up with the things that are assigned to me. So that's something I have to work on, but I will always be aware of those things. Okay. Some other variations of this, if I open this box up, I can kind of show you. So we can make more of these if need be too, dynamically or unique to you. But right now in here, I have a basic workflow like the one we're looking at. I have a basic workflow with a signature, simple print to PDF, Excel, simple PO item, simple, and then a two signature workflow as well. In all of these, they're going to have different responsibilities. They might have more lines on them for people that can be assigned to them from different roles. So it allows you the flexibility to make sure that you're capturing those points that you need to, signing off, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, etc. Okay. Now in this case, I'm just going to go back to my basic, click next. I'll assign myself again and complete. All right. Back to our index. When you're looking at information on this screen, it's not necessarily going to be reflective of what you're going to see on your end result, because a lot of this is just data that we want to show. So if I click on this process flow, for example, this is going to show me on the screen the processes that I have built out in my manufacturing ops and their symbols. It's important to note also, I don't need to have characteristics tied to this process flow. So in the case I have here, I do, but I could also have processes above this. Maybe I've got one for material handling. You know, I'm bringing that material out of the storage area into my machine. I could have that in here and I could have that as a, you know, either a store get or a move or whatever one you're using for your methodology. I could have another one in here for inspection. I could have one in here for shipping, whatever this needs to have in it to match your process flow. Okay. Into next, the control plan. Again, this is going to look different on the screen than it does in the printed output version, but this is a representation in an easy to see grid on the screen. So I have my characteristics that are broken out by my operations here, my sampling rates, the actual requirements, all of that information. And then next into my FMEA. Again, same thing. It's going to look this way on the screen. We can have it different formats on the actual report. But you can see how this information is kind of coming through. These, again, when I was showing the processes, this is whatever number of process failure modes, excuse me, and their weights that I have set up in the system. So if I have a lot more of these, this is obviously going to grow with that. And if I have a lot more processes, again, that'll grow with whatever that needs to incorporate in potential failure modes. Lastly, typically, you know, when you're done with this, we'll click a sync materials and drawings. That's going to bring all of my information in. So that's going to bring in my materials. That's going to bring in my balloon drawing, etc. And I normally go through the submission level on this. In this case, I took a shortcut and I just made myself a quick package so I could kind of show a variation of what the actual output of this might look like. I'm going to grab just a PDF of this quick. And open that on the screen so I can kind of show what this looks like now. So I've got just kind of a generic cover sheet on here. This is going to pull in the logo from what I have set up as my logo in the company. That's part of the setup in the software, is to put your logo in there for documentation. I've got my balloon drawing. Then I've got my part submission warrant with, you know, any information that I populated on here, any checks that I've already checked, signatures, etc., flowing into my process flow, my control plan. I'll kind of go quickly through the rest of this stuff here. My failure mode information. Then I get into my FAI, so my AS9102. Then I've got my results in here from actually what I collected from the shop floor, and might be a combination again of manual and CMM data. Maybe it's all CMM, whatever it needs to be. Then I've got a gauge R&R in here that I populated. Maybe my customer requires that. And then into my material at the end. So all in all, this is, you know, to kind of recap what we've touched on here so far. We're centralizing the data. So we're not We're not having all of this presented in different broken components that kind of end up being their own silos. I have a set of documents that are built in Excel. I have drawings that are maintained by engineers, and none of these are really aligned necessarily until they need to be used together. And at that point, now we need to maybe make some decisions because they aren't one and the same. Something got changed and I wasn't aware of. Doing it in a centralized environment like this allows those to always be in sync with each other. I don't need to repeat any of my effort that I've performed already. I don't need to make sure that these things are in sync because the control plan, the inspection plan, the sampling, the drawing, those are all tied. If I need to do revisions, those are all available to see on top of each other. I was actually talking to somebody, as an anecdote yesterday, I believe, that they love the functionality of the revision control in here because it's so easy to see the things that change between them. They're going to use that now to validate if their revision notes match up with what they're seeing in the drawing. It's an easy check now to make sure that nothing was missed from an engineering side. So all of that data being in one central location keeps them intrinsically aligned with each other. And it's one less thing I have to occupy my mind with. Now I'm just getting the data I need. I don't need to do copy and pasting now when it comes to the actual submission information. And now I'm ready to make parts and spend less time worrying about these processes. Okay. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan now. And we continue on.
Thanks, Chad.
Yep.
All right. So now that we gave a real high level overview of the platform, just to touch on some additional things about installation. We can be an on-premise solution or in the cloud. We're hosted in the AWS GovCloud. So again, being in the aerospace, medical, defense industries, security is of the utmost importance to us. We are fully ITAR compliant, and we have built-in digital rights management. So letting you manage specific users in your network and also among your suppliers, so who can access specific content. So the point to emphasize here is if security is of a concern to you, as it should be, as it is with all of our customers, those are things we're very adept to. So talking about connecting with other solutions. So we do have a strong RESTful API. So whether that's connecting with your ERP, PLMs, MESs, those are all things a lot of our customers are doing, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is save time in a consistent manner. So by doing so, we have everything talking with one another. You don't have manual errors. You're saving time and you're promoting consistency. We also have several plug and play ready ERP connectors. Feel free to reach out to us individually with what ERP you're using, and we can talk about how our customers are utilizing that integration. Okay, so hopefully you got a glimpse as far as how configurable and really customizable the platform can be. Along with that, we want to ensure the correct implementation and support. So over 20% of our staff is dedicated post-sale. So whether that's onboarding, implementation, and really unlimited maintenance and support, we also supplement that with what we call a high QA academy. So as we all know, turnover in the industry is a concern. So as you have new people come in, maybe less experience in the manufacturing as a whole, or with your processes in particular, we have a self-paced academy where it is quiz-based. So it really teaches you where the buttons are, when to use them. But then we supplement that with one-on-one training where we take your apprentice through the entire process. So in summary, hopefully you got an idea of how High QA, first and foremost, can help you plan a job faster. Our auto ballooning software is how we were founded, and it is certainly one of our biggest claims to fame. just getting the dimensions extracted and into the database. You saw on Chad's thing, right? 12 seconds. Then we take it a step further. Being in the database, we're automating the data collection. So whether that's coming from your CMMs or from your manual calipers, mics, stuff like that, we're doing all of that in one spot. Again, general theme is promoting consistency and saving time, with the added benefit of reduction in errors, obviously. And then Chad touched on it, how in just a couple of clicks of the button, we're creating reporting. So custom reports, whether that be a first article, industry specific first articles, and then ultimate submission packages like the PPAP. So we were really high level as far as what we showed here today. What we would love to do, if there is interest from the folks here on the webinar, is we want to demo your own prints. We like to dive a little bit deeper into what you saw here today, but specifically for your own parts. Usually at that point, the ROI becomes very apparent as far as the time savings that are able to be derived from automating both the job planning, the reporting, and the data collection. So now I'm going to pass this back all over to Lisa, who will read some questions, and whether it's Chad or myself, we'll be sure to answer those for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ryan, and Chad as well. Okay, as Ryan mentioned, now is the time where we invite you to ask questions. You can go ahead and type into your chat at the bottom of your screen. We did have several questions come in throughout the session, so let's dive right in. The first one says, can you explain how connecting to my CMMs automatically would work?
Let me unmute myself. So essentially the way they work is we have a team that does the integration portion of it. If you're looking at doing it in an automatic version where it's running in the background, we have a service that monitors a folder for that. So essentially you pick a location on your network where outputs from that are going to be placed. And then in combination with our integrations team, they will make sure that the data that's coming out of your collected records are going to match what we need in the system. So the balloon numbers will typically have to match. There's usually a piece of data that has to be added to that isn't in a normal CMM program, and that is the metadata for the job. So that it knows what job it's going against, as well as what sample it's going against, and then ultimately, or a lot, and then what sample. So those are the key points that are usually needed to be modified inside the program. Once that's the case, then that monitors it, and there's basically it brings that in and applies that to the job. As long as everything comes in good, we don't have to worry about it, but there's also the ability to look at results that were brought in from the CMM and see how they were mapped as well. And those can be modified once they're brought in if things weren't mapped correctly. But then parallel to that, we'd look at the program and understand why it didn't come in so we can tweak that with you. So there's a whole process for the implementation of that involves kind of building up in stages where, step one is doing this manually, bringing it in, evaluating the data. Then we're starting to move into the automatic portion of it until all of that is seamless.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question says, are there drawing clarity requirements?
There are. So obviously we're, our software is based on OCR, so optical character recognition. So the clearer the drawing, the better it's going to do on it. Typically a PDF, if it's coming from a CAD system, is exported. There's almost no issue with it at all. So those will perform pretty much like the drawing that I use in the example today. It's going to come in, it's going to apply it. You're not going to have any issues. The closest thing you'll have to issues is usually then if you have leader lines that are too close or that are touching characteristics. Those are some things that can cause some issues. But if you have older drawings that have been, maybe they started out as paper, if they're old DoD drawings and they got scanned in and then they got scanned and copied and maneuvered and copied again, those will do less well. Actually, Ryan and I worked with some yesterday together that were of this. It will do its best. It's not going to stop us from trying to bring that data in, Sometimes I'm really impressed by how well it does on things, and other times I'm like, yeah, that's about what I would have expected. In either case, though, we still can use that information. So there's kind of two things that we can do in that. One, we can manually make all those dimensions. Once they're in here as the part record, that part record's good. We can reuse it as many times as we want. So there's a one-time setup. Additionally, what we can do as well is that operations drawing stuff that I talked about. So if you are using that, but you're also using your own manufacturing operations, and that's actually what you're doing your checks against, we can, have those balloons be the ones that we're actually pulling information from and do an association to it. So there's some methods for making that more efficient than trying to manually make everything each time. But that's all something that we go through during the implementation process also.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, Chad, real quick, a blanket
Mhm.
statement is there's no drawing that you can't fully balloon and complete and create reports for outside of HiQA. The level of quality just determines the amount of automation we're able to do. So just kind of a blanket statement. There's quality of the drawings matters, but we can handle everything. It's just kind of the level of automation.
Mhm.
Speaking of other systems, that leads into the next question that's here. It says, is it possible to bubble CATIA?
Yeah. So there's actually one of the OCR methods in the drop downs when you're populating or when you're doing your bubbling is CATIA. So you can change the OCR language, if you will, specifically for that. So that was a pretty short and sweet answer, but yes, it's actually one of the options when you're doing the ballooning.
Great. Okay, here's the next question. It says, if we have our own control plan, PFMEA, etc., would we be able to download to this, or would we have to generate a new one from your format?
So there's kind of two answers to that, and it depends on how you need to submit that question or that documentation. So essentially, we have our standard documents, and those are we can share a link to those also. Those are set up and they're meant to match obviously the kind of standards for the quality standards. If we need to, we can modify ours so that they match what you need to submit to your customers. There's typically not a method for us to download the data into a document like that, though, unless you're doing copy and paste. We do have some basic reporting in the system that is more Excel based. So if you're looking to get information into more of an Excel report, we do have methods of getting that as well in our other reporting. Well, we can do that in PQP or standard reporting. But typically we're not populating to another document that already exists that you were given by a customer, if that makes sense. We also do have some exports for things like net inspect, that kind of stuff that are already built into the system. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay. And if you have further questions, feel free to type again or reach out to us after the session. Okay, here's another question around welding. There's a couple of them in here. It says, I would like to use the software to generate a weld joint database for creating weld procedures, map the drawing, create a joining database. Do we have any history of anyone doing this?
So we do have welding built into the system. Map drawing, create a joining database. I'm not 100% certain on what you mean on that, but what I can say is there's not a lot of there wasn't a lot of effort put into us using OCR to generate the weld symbology. So we do have the ability to do welding ballooning in here, and essentially the way that looks is there's actually a different button on the side for ballooning welding. When I select that, I can draw a box around my weld symbol. And based on what it selects, it does its best guess at putting the values on there, and then addressing what type of a weld it is. With that in mind, we have the ability to do, the lengths of it, the circulate, or, basically you can do all of your weld symbology in there. But some of it's going to be manually that we're putting it into there the first time, kind of like a poorly done drawing would be, if we had a really, really bad, like a napkin drawing that we were bringing data in from. we're not going to do a very good job of OCRing it because it's hard to read stuff. It might be different sized fonts if it's handwritten, especially. But it's kind of like that. But what we do have is there's actually a full box that is intended to represent pretty much all of the weld symbols. So, you've got symbols that are on either side of the fillet. You've got your circular symbols. I've got my leader arrow. I've got values on the top and the bottom. All of those can be populated. Um, I've got my multipliers, my arrow at the back, my cone. All of those are areas that values can be populated in that, and all of that can exist on the drawing. So essentially, you can fully encapsulate the welding process in the system, and then repeatedly use that as much as you need, and that will be that database. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Here's the next question. With the software package, do we have access to HiQA Academy for training purposes?
Yes. Yes, that's part of as soon as you sign on with us, you have access to that. Yep. And we are actually currently building an even more advanced variation of that. That's a lot more interactive. So the training materials that we had were already pretty solid, but they had some room for improvement. So we're taking that initiative, and now we have the first version of that generated and actually translated into Spanish as well, which we intend to do with all of them. But the main purpose of it is to make it a more interactive experience, because we don't want people to, I'm not saying this happens, but in the case that it did, we don't want people to just click through things and get done with it. We want them to actually, be interacting with it. So part of that classroom environment now is you'll actually have interactive screens that emulate our software, and you'll be clicking those functions in there, selecting stuff just like you would with the normal software. So you're building that muscle memory and learning how the product's used.
Makes sense. Okay, there's a couple last questions here we'll go ahead and tackle before we conclude the session. It's asking about how do we interface with NetInspect?
Yeah, so essentially the way that functions is we have outputs in our actual output, or in our standard reporting, that are formatted to work specifically with NetInspect, whether you're looking for the full variation or just the Form 3. That's basically just a standard output that exists in our system.
Okay, here is another one. What if the new updated revision of the print has been dramatically changed, i.e. features moved to different views, print size changed? Does the software identify these changes?
So the way it works is when you bring in, the way that the revision starts is there's a drop down in there to create a new revision. When you do that, you get to select what piece of data you're copying from the existing part, and then you're putting in your new revision. Then at that point, it is taking the part that you're working on currently and making an exact duplicate of that with the new revision name. So once I've done that, I now select that part and I open it up. At this point, this part is identical in every way to the one I made before, with the exception of the rev change. Now I'm going to bring in new drawings. So there's two options. One is bring in new drawing. The other one's bring in new drawings, multiple. Obviously, the difference between those is one is just one page drawing. The other one is multiples. And you can handle a multiple either way. And I'll go into more detail in that if you ever want to have that in person. But the gist of it is you're looking at one page at a time. So if your view moved to a different page, then ultimately we're probably going to just re-balloon it on the other page and then renumber it to match. But if it moved across the actual one page you're looking at right now, then what you're going to see is you're going to see an area on there that's in red color, because as I mentioned, the old drawing will show up in red, the new drawing will show up in blue. Where those overlap perfectly, you're going to see a black color. Anything else you're going to see one variation of those two colors. So there's actually two steps when you first bring in a drawing. The first one is the alignment step. So when you first bring that in, you're going to have a box on there, and it gives you little instructions on that to use your keyboard keys. You can use the up and down arrows, the left and right arrows to move the new drawing from left to right, up and down to align everything. And then you can use the plus and minus keys to increase or reduce the size of your drawing, in case it was a different scale or it was, different size. So that first step is to get us to basically outline everything and make sure that our borders are aligned, our characteristics, our drawings, all of that stuff is in order. Once we've got that done, then we hit accept. Now we get into step 2, and that's the ballooning portion of it. There's a checkbox on there to show the old drawing, to show the new drawing, and to show the balloons. And I can uncheck any of those as I need to be able to do comparisons on them. And then let's just say I've got the view in the upper left corner that moved to the upper right corner and everything moved with it. I can actually grab all of those balloons and move them over to where they moved on the right side. And then if something got removed from that, like I got rid of a characteristic from this one, I can delete the one I need to get rid of. By default, all of those are going to be locked. So we're not going to be able to reuse that number if some other stuff got added, because we want to maintain our integrity across those. If I ever want to evaluate this characteristic, I don't want to have it be replaced by another one because I deleted it. So it's all based around being able to easily identify where things went, be able to move those quickly, but then also maintain the integrity across the different revisions. So.
Great. Okay, let's conclude with this final question. It says, how long does it take to deploy and implement the software for the FAI process?
If we're just going to a standard FAI, typical implementation time frame is probably right around 3 to 4 months. It can be expedited, or it can be increased in time, really mainly based around the personnel that we're collaborating with on your side. So one of the key things that really defines a successful and efficient implementation is the champion and the executive sponsor on our customer side. And what I mean by those terms are, champion is the person that we're working day in, day out with, that it's helping us basically keep everything on task, and they're our eyes and ears on the ground on the facility. Now, that doesn't mean that we need them working with us 8 hours a day or anything like that, but it does mean when we're setting up a meeting and we're asking for status and we're doing training sessions, that they're the ones that are helping us facilitate those actions. They're also the ones that are going to bring things to our attention that we may not be aware of, that are unique to your company, your business, that kind of thing. So the level of the champion is very critical in this. They should have the ability to make decisions within reason, to help us push things along to a certain extent where they need to, and help us connect to the teams that we need to. And then when I refer to the executive sponsor, they're the one that has some ownership in this as well. They're not going to be involved in the day-to-day activity kind of stuff, but they are there when we run into an impasse that our champion can help us with, to kind of help push things along and be the, I don't know what the right term I want to use is, but essentially they're the ones that can push through that blockage and really make that decision that's become a holdup. Those two things right there really can make this process a lot more efficient when we're working with people that are dedicated and strong and have the same vision.
Collaboration and teamwork. That's what HiQA is all about. So perfect.
Absolutely.
At this time, we will go ahead and conclude the session. We did record the entire webinar, so we will be emailing that out in the next couple of days if you'd like to watch the playback or share it with your colleagues. I also dropped a little link in the chat there. If you would like to see a personalized one-on-one demonstration, we are more than happy to spend more time with you. Thank you so much for spending the hour with us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.